You done with this conversation? Yeah.
All right, cool. All right. So,
Can you tone it down for us a little bit, actually?
yeah.
Yes.
So,
Not so, but
Oh, yeah, that's good.
bro.
I don't know why we put the tallest person right up in front.
All right, cool. So we're going live. We're doing a stream here. We're talking about the presidential election and the climate and how it has been affecting a lot of people here in this country. Who are here today is Ren, Alex, and Manuel. So we're all going to sit here, have a kind of a round table, and we will have a discussion. And we'll open it up for questions later. If anyone wants to chime in, please just let us know. We'll be doing this every Monday with different topics, and yeah, it's cool.
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is I just wanted to ask how each of you is feeling. It's November 2nd, so tomorrow is election day. Tomorrow night we get results. I think the most basic counseling question there is how do you feel about that?
Right.
I think it's a good place for us to start to sort of go around and say how we're feeling about things tomorrow.
Okay.
I'll start off. There's a lot of election anxiety. Just making sure that people in your inner circle are getting those ballots filled out, turning them in. I know there's a few people that I was like, "Did you get your ballot done? I'll get to it. I'll get to it." And finally being like, "Hey, I got it done today. I dropped it off," and then a little bit of that weight coming off of the shoulders, most certainly. But no interaction per se with individuals about topics in which you make you uncomfortable. It's just like we just want to get this done, so there wasn't any sort of harassment or any mischief behavior or anything like that. It was just everyone I'm in my camp is like, hey, we're going to get this done. We know who we voted for. Going over the issues, talking about the issues. That booklet was pretty massive. I mean,
Super thick.
yeah. So and going through like even judges and trying to get a good scope of what was going on. So just making sure that everyone is voting. So that was definitely my thing.
Are you saying that part of your anxiety was feeling pressure to encourage other people to vote?
Yes.
Okay.
Most certainly.
That is interesting.
It's like for me, I wasn't working with I wasn't volunteering anywhere. I wasn't with any special group or anything like that. I think it was due diligence and saying, as a citizen, making sure that you do your duty to inform others and to make sure that everyone votes who is eligible to vote. So, yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. I think the overall climate is that there's a lot of uncertainty. And when you have such a cloud of uncertainty, it brings about a behavior that can be aggressive, where people now feel that they're fighting for survival. And when you get people that are fighting, that are in survival mode and wanting to fight for their survival, and this is not just on one side, this is on both sides. Whether you're voting for Biden or whether you're voting for Trump, both sides right now feel that it's for their survival. And so that's going to bring about a very aggressive climate from people. They are going to look at each other like you're the enemy. You're the reason why things are the way that they are, and we need to eradicate you. So now you have everybody looking at each other that they're the reason why stuff is going the way that it's going, and it's just causing more conflict, right? And the voting is not really voting out of I'm going to vote because it's my duty to vote. and I'm passionate about voting and knowing who's going into these offices and really understanding what these offices do for us as a community. It's now I'm voting because if I don't vote, we see what happened 2016.
Mhm.
You know, so it's more of like I'm voting out of the fact that I need to vote because if I don't, then this person stays in office, right? Or
It's
I'm
like a
voting
sense of self-preservation.
a sense of self-preservation, exactly. Instead of us really understanding what these offices do and what they offer us, we've totally foregone that process.
So are you saying that it also feels like just such a cultural figurehead? Like
Yes,
a Democratic president represents issues X, Y, and Z, and a Republican president represents A, B, and C.
mm,
If I have any tie to any of those letters, I need to vote this way to preserve my way of life.
exactly, exactly. And right now, preserving that way of life, it comes down to what are you preserving, right? Because you know, I've talked to Republicans and I've talked to Democrats, and each side wants the same thing. You know, each side wants.
Sorry, can you say more about that?
I will. Each side.
Because hold up.
He was like, please,
Elaborate on that.
elaborate on that. We're talking about the basics of education, safety, shelter, economic stability, right?
Maslow's hierarchy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're talking about Maslow's hierarchy, right? We're
Okay.
talking about everyone wants to know that I can have a future, right? I can have a future that I can give to my kids. I want to know that my job is not going to be here today and gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, I want to know that there'll be good, you know, fresh food and products to put in my refrigerator for me and my family, right? And so that's the basics that everybody wants. That's what we're fighting for, that preservation of life, right? You know, now as far as, you know, all these other things, you know, I get it, you know, fracking and you know, I want to know that if I go to the doctor, healthcare, right? People want to know, hey, if I go to the doctor, I'm not gonna have to shell out $10,000.
I can get a treatment that I need.
I can get a treatment that I need and get taken care of, and I can give my kids the treatment that they need. They need, you know,
Especially during COVID.
especially during COVID, right? And everybody wants these exact same things. It's like getting into an argument with somebody, and y'all sit there and argue for 40 minutes to only come and find out that y'all arguing about the same thing. Right? And at the end, you're like, well, that's what I've been saying. Well, that's what I've been saying too. Right? And that's what it looks like to me right now. And that's the climate of it, right?
Yeah, there's an image that's coming to my head right now that's like if we're at this point right here, and we're trying to get to this point. Let's say this is like a city or something. They're just two currently very different ways of getting there. And one might be, hacking your way through jungle, but it's like flat land.
Mhm.
And the other way is all up and down, crazy through mountains and snow and stuff like that. So what I'm hearing you say is it's really about the difference in how we achieve those goals. We all have the same human needs and desires. And in the political system, it feels like there are two paths on how to accomplish those things. And that's where the differences occur.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
In your experience or in your thoughts, how do you navigate the differences in the paths? Because while the starting place or the end goal may be the same, there is an extremely tangible difference. And I think we're feeling the weight of that difference right now in how we choose our paths or what those paths look like. And how you prepare for those paths. Again, if you're going through that jungle, you need a machete and bug spray and things like that. If you're going through the mountains with snow, you need all this winter gear. So like that's metaphorically representative of lots of different things for how we prepare to engage in the world around us. If somehow we're looking at each other, myself in my jungle hat with a machete and you with your mountain clothes on covered in snow, how do we see the similarities there and have a conversation of like, this is what our path looks like. This is the place that we are both trying to get.
Mm.
How do we bridge that gap?
I would have 2 words, and that would be listening and perspective.
Okay.
Right? When you want to understand where someone is coming from, you have to listen to them. And I don't mean listen to respond. I mean listen to understand. Right? Which is very different. It takes it takes developing that to listen to understand. Right? Because people mainly want to get their point across. Oh, what do you mean? This is my point. This is how I feel, and my point is way more important, and my point means more than this. And that's what's going on right now.
Mm.
Is people are arguing their points
Mhm.
and not listening to understand. So listening to understand is one.
Good.
Perspective is the ultimate thing, right? Because if I'm listening to you and I'm understanding, and I think I'm understanding, but I don't see your perspective, then how much am I really understanding? Right? Because we all look at things a different way,
Yeah.
right? So when I see you walking across the flatland, with your machete, right, hacking through leaves, and you see me come down, with my knapsack on, I got, and I have snow on me, and I say to you, how, what are you doing? And you say to me, well, I'm trying to get the point here.
Yeah.
And I'm hacking through these leaves and everything else. And this is what I've had to gone through. And this is what I've gone through. And I say, okay, I get that. It sounds like you're trying to get over here. And you're like, yeah. And you're like, what are you doing? And I say, from my perspective, right, man, I've had to go over these mountains. I've been covered in snow, but I'm still trying to get here though.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing. I think we are neglecting the journey for the destination without really looking at the journey and seeing that the journey is extremely similar and the destination is the exact same, if I make sense.
Yeah. I think certainly similar in that they're both arduous.
Yeah.
And I think something else that I'm hearing from everything that you're saying is that 2 words that are coming to me are fear and control. I think those are huge driving factors in human beings. And I think a lot of people feel afraid.
Yes.
For themselves, for their families. Again, I think especially right now.
Yeah.
And you mentioned uncertainty, and I think we all are seeking control in different ways in our life. And this feels like something, even though we are literally, what this is our chance to vote, to try to get some form of control. That's what democracy is supposed to be.
Right.
It feels out of our control right now.
Mhm.
And I think when things feel out of control for us, that's when we do all kinds of wild stuff to try and get that control back, to try to feel some sense of power to accomplish something.
Yeah, definitely. I Ren was talking about that fear when you were bringing up that the threats.
Yeah, because kids and their social media. The youngest one is on TikTok, and they've seen some TikToks about like threats, basically, of like what's going to happen if so and so gets voted in, and what's going to happen to these groups of people if so and so gets voted in. So she sent me a screenshot today and asked me if she should be worried. So for me, I think my anxiety and worry comes for them.
Yeah.
Because I don't ever want them to feel like they should be afraid to exercise their right to vote, or they would feel any type of fear of saying like, yeah, I voted for this person and this is why. Because what we did actually was we printed out mock ballots for them.
Cool.
And we went through the ballots together as a family and asked questions. And then there was such a pivotal moment in the conversation where the 15-year-old was like, I want to vote no to this. And the 13-year-old was like, I want to vote yes to this. But they both had valid points of why they wanted to vote yes or no. And we told them, vote however you want, but know why you're voting and stand by it. So when we have conversations like that, and then she is like now afraid, my fear for her is that, she won't have that same confidence.
For real.
To stick by her choice.
May I ask, how did you respond to that? To her saying, should I be worried? Should I be scared?
At first, it kind of threw me off. But I just told her, like, I think that there's a lot of anxiety, basically. Like, there's just a lot of anxiety, and we can't live in fear. Like, we're safe, and if something were to happen, like, we'll be at home. But also know, like, there's a lot of tension. So, like, when I got home, I told her there's just like a lot of tension. What does that mean? But there's just like a lot of tension, and I think what I want to add is that another reason why this is just so different is because everything else that's happened prior to it has been a lot different. Feels a lot different.
Yeah.
We're talking about depression is at an all-time high.
True.
Suicide, anxiety, addictions, people being locked down has just like totally thrown everything for a curveball. So on top of that, now adding the election, I think we're feeling double that tension of what's already been bubbling up. Now cases are going up again, so there's that anxiety. So just kind of like for me as a parent, trying to reassure them like you stick by your word. You stand firm in how you vote. Regardless if you guys disagree at this table, you still love each other. And that's just your brother and sister, you're gonna love each other.
Yeah.
But no, when she says, yes, I would vote yes to this, and you say I will vote no, that you can stand by it. So even though she feels fearful, I'm still gonna tell her to stand by it. Stand by how you vote.
Definitely.
So I guess for me it's just been a little bit of like anxiety for their generation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think both of you have now sort of alluded to how increasingly bipartisan the system feels. Even in saying like both sides, there's one side, there's two sides. And so that's a trend that also seems scary for years to come. If that schism continues to grow bigger and bigger, that seems tough to consider. Can I also ask, when you were doing mock, especially with your kids, what was breaking down the language like? I just like for myself, and I am college educated, it can be very difficult to understand what the language is actually intending when you read the ballot.
True.
It's very law-based legislative language, a lot of therefores and thou shalt nots and things like that. It's a lot of like quadruple negatives. So I honestly don't know what I'm voting for at this point. And like there are resources out there to help you with those things, but I just was curious if you had that conversation with your kids at all too.
I think I would say something and I could see the blank stares in their eyes, or we'd all look at each other and go, what does that mean?
Yeah.
But we had a whole little setup where we were like looking things up. If we had to look up a word to figure out what it was, we were clarifying, like just kind of showing them that even for us, it doesn't take 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Like even for us, like we have to plan,
and it shouldn't,
like an hour or two to really sit down and like go through this and understand it and read it out loud, read it several times, or open up several different resources.
Yeah.
So if they had clarifying questions, we try to be really good about like, okay, let's try to figure this out.
Well, I guess that's a good little piece of advice to pull is, and this is how I voted for the last several years, is to always have a trusted or loved one around to try to have that conversation with. Just it's like a little check and balance for yourself. Like, hey, am I understanding this correctly? I'm gonna look this up on this site. Can you check this thing up on this website? And we're gonna cross-reference. I think it makes it a lot more manageable.
We had a group of about, what was it, probably about 15 of us?
Yeah, 15 or 20.
Yeah, about 15 or 20, and we went through the ballot, and everybody had a part of the ballot that they did research on, which I thought was extremely helpful. And really breaking down what each section was about, what each proposition was about. You know, the only thing we really didn't go over was, judges, the people,
Mhm.
right? It was more like you're going over, the amendments,
Yeah.
the propositions,
Mhm.
and then the people, it's kind of just left up to you,
Gotcha.
right? You do your own research on them,
Yeah.
you answer accordingly. But
Super cool just for your own learning as well.
yeah,
Mhm.
definitely.
If that gets passed,
Mm,
you have some even minor expertise to talk about that later. Like, yeah, I did
right.
5-8 hours of research on this before I voted. I'm happy to tell you about it. That's cool.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have people from all different backgrounds and walks of life giving their opinion on stuff, which I thought was tremendous.
Cool.
Yeah.
How did you set that group up? What
Well,
was
I
it?
didn't set it up. Katie she's somebody I've known for years, but she set it up, and then her and Ren really like collabed on it and
Cool.
kind of just got the ball rolling. And yeah, and yeah.
I mean, that also sort of doubles for what Manny was talking about and just provides a little bit of insurance that the people who you care about are voting.
Yeah.
If you're making sure you all do it together,
True.
that maybe can ease some of that tension as well.
Absolutely. I think it was to speak to that as well, just having that ability to do research. Well, at least with my family, it was I'm usually the one doing the research. They're like, "Hey, go through it," but trying to check sites that are across the board. It's not just one sided, but a lot of going to the Colorado Judicial Branch and actually looking up judges. Like went through each one and said, "Okay, they volunteer for this
That's
cause, or they came in under Hickenlooper or whatever." But also having conversations with people with propositions and amendments and what it is that they thought about a particular issue. For instance, quite a few times came about the introduction of wolves back, and
Yeah.
and that was something for me. I was like, well, okay, great to have a species in the population, but then if an agriculturalist loses livestock, the state has to pay that agriculturalist. So I was like, that's money that could be used for, if we could try to diminish that somehow, prevent that, then fine. But that was my standpoint just on one of those issues. But yeah, having the ability to sit down with others and have those checks and balances and say, am I hearing this correctly? Am I reading this correctly? Going through the legalese, because I mean, essentially that's what it is. And I think also too that is done in two parts is because the way laws are written, they very dense things you have to break down. A lot has to be compact and put in place. Then also it becomes a deterrent. I mean, people who don't want to read that, someone who gets that in the mail and is like, I don't have anything to do. And so a friend of mine at work, his girlfriend was with the Democratic Party, and she had a website, Democrats of Colorado, and it gave more of a bullet point list, a cheat sheet, if you will, of the information and what they thought you should vote for, but at the same time, taking it into your own cognizant and saying, okay, this is what this is what I think about that issue, so maybe I won't vote yes on this, but at least you can have things more clearly defined.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
What do you think?
I have lots of thoughts. Before I answer, may I ask another question?
Sure.
No, that's all right. I'll answer your question first. Okay, how I've been feeling in general. I think I'm appreciative right now in hearing all three of you speak, just because I think I've had sort of like a weight on my chest for the last couple of weeks. Well, longer than that, but and it seems to be getting heavier or tighter as we lead up to tomorrow. So I think for me, I'm just feeling tangibly that fear and that worry. It is my personal perspective that people are pretty much the only thing that really matter in life. I just have personally never cared for money. or material items. I enjoy experiences, but I think people and the legacy that you leave are the things that really matter. And it feels like a time where people are hurting so much and people are at odds so much that that it feels palpable to me. So I think I feel confused and not quite sure how to handle those emotions internally or externally. I think it, for myself, especially as a white man, I recognize that I have a power that I bring to a lot of circumstances. And that's not necessarily a voice that I want to use to yell. And I'm not sure that I feel like I know enough or more than other people to be able to do that anyway. So I think I'm mostly just trying to figure out how to find a place to be helpful and voice my opinions and also not seem like I'm falling into one of two sides or seem angry or like I'm refusing to understand someone else's perspective. So it feels like this very razor thin edge that I'm trying to walk on. And I imagine that is how a lot of other people feel as well.
Now, are you hoping that after tomorrow that
that goes away?
Yeah.
Oh, what a great question.
Heaviness that you feel in your chest
Can
will
I-
now be lifted?
But can I ask another question
Sure,
with
yeah.
that? Can you define what that heaviness is? Because when you say heavy, I'm like, well, what is that?
Yeah. Okay, I'll answer yours first. Do I hope it goes away? Heck yeah. Do I expect it to? Absolutely not. No. And maybe that contributes to an answer of what the heaviness is. And hopefully these are things that we continue to talk about, but the world just feels like a hard place to exist in right now. And I think we all have things that happen inside of us, traumas that we experience, little t and big T, that shape who we are and how we walk through the world. Those are thoughts, fears, feelings that we're having inside of us all on our own. And then all of these things that are happening externally. And right now, the external world feels especially big and scary and weird.
Definitely.
So I think that heaviness for me is a combination of both of those things, like everything that has gotten me to the place where I am in my life right now, and recognizing that like everyone's having a really hard time, and there are things that feel pivotal, whether it's the environment or politics or healthcare. I mean, we've started to bring up a couple of issues like that. And even you mentioned it feels like self-preservation. I think some of that is that weight, like all this feels really huge. And perspective is important there. Sometimes I try to like take a step back and figure out is tomorrow really going to change what X and Y look like? I don't really know.
So, it makes me think when you talk, it makes me think about coping skills.
Okay.
And do you feel, and this is for all three of you, do you feel that there is a lack of coping skills amongst society right now? And that is why everybody is kind of, all over the place emotionally, if I'm asking the right question.
I hear two different questions there. One is there a lack of coping skills? And two is that the cause of all the emotionality?
Yes.
I would say absolutely there's a lack of coping skills. And it's such a buzzword, especially in counseling or mental health. So maybe that's something we can talk about another time. Is that the cause? I personally would say definitely not.
Okay.
Coping skills to me feel like a a physical or tangible representation of how to handle some surface level things. But like, I don't think you can heal yourself or be the most successful version of yourself with just coping skills. That's my personal perspective.
Not
I
definitely.
think you need something much deeper than that.
Yeah, definitely understand.
Well, yeah. What about you two?
I feel that personally with emotions, it's kind of the external stimuli of what's happening rather with finances or school or personal life, family life. I think there is some play where having better coping skills would be something that would be beneficial.
Of course.
And as you go along, you're just figuring out, you're just wading through the water, essentially. I always have this where I'm just staying above murky waters, and it's you feel like you're being pulled down constantly, and you're just getting enough air just to breathe, just to make it through. And that is something that, rather if you're dealing with conflict between family members and the election, which I have heard many stories across the board where families are fighting right now, and we're dealing with lack of resources financially. Someone lost a job in the family, and someone else is picking up the slack for that, and then trying to raise their kids and dealing with the whole remote learning, and just the eeriness of it is very emotional. But I think it's just a sense of trauma that we are in right now, and people are trying to figure out what works best and what they can do to get through day by day. I know, at least for me, it's a day by day thing. And many people that I know, it's a day by day thing. It's um, taking what you have that's positive, knowing that at least I can wake up and see another day, that I have a job that I can go to, that I can have interaction with people and say, hello, how are you doing? I know a lot is going on, but just having a sense of positivity to express and having a smile has been warming. The industry that I work in, people are coming in and they use music as a sense of therapy to get them through their days and their struggles, and to just even have a conversation about a particular album that they're purchasing and why they find that music to be so enriching in their life, that genre of music, whatever it is, or that artist, or that particular album. So it's something to share that experience and knowing that you're extending that to someone, and that they're going home and they're listening to that album, and no matter what's going on, they can just kind of take that moment in time to feel at peace, to feel some sort of balance. So,
Okay.
I agree. I agree with both of you, but I also feel like during this time when everything kind of just started changing for people's perspective on how they normally cope changed, which then caused them to feel higher levels of anxiety. So like me, I'm an introvert, so I don't get, my energy doesn't get gained from being around a lot of people.
Yeah.
But people that used to cope, by going out with their friends, or by connecting with other people, or by getting away from their children, like,
Which is maybe every parent.
like every parent.
Yeah.
Because now we're seeing like that mix of like, I have to work, and I have to do homeschool, and I have to be a parent, and I have to be a spouse all in one place. I think people all of a sudden were like, coping strategies, what are those things? How do you use them? Because the way that they were dealing with situations or finding joy in the little moments in life looked a lot different before. So I just see an intensity of like, okay, now I have to figure out something different to do when I feel sad, or when I feel angry, or when I feel depressed. And what does that look like? And will I like it? And is that healthy? So I've been seeing an increase of like self-care, coping strategies. We all need to do it. We all need to do it now. That's just because I think that the change in the anxiety of forcing people into situations where they've had to think outside of the norm of how they normally find joy in life. Does that make sense?
So my brain often just like works in images. So I just had another image that came to my mind across a lot of these topics. The pressure, having your world sort of like shrink, all those things. For some reason, I was just imagining that, let's say I was a person who lived in like a giant fish tank. It has felt like in the last 6 months, 8 months, that has shrunk to the size of a snow globe. So all of that pressure is now like pushing down in a different way. And I'm so limited in how I can let that out or where I can let that out. That then that's just like reflecting off of those walls. And you have that claustrophobia of like, I can feel that it's getting worse, bigger, harder, it's all around me, et cetera, et cetera. So that might be another way for me to answer the question of that heaviness or that tension is it kind of feels like that.
And then they just keep
it's gonna,
throwing
like,
more stuff in the tank. Like
Yeah.
racial tension.
Yeah.
The election.
Fires.
Fires. Yeah. For
Sprinkle
real.
a little bit of that in there.
For real.
Yeah.
So it, it's starting to feel like at some point me and all this other stuff are not going to fit in this snow globe anymore. Like we're all getting squeezed here, and it has to break.
It has to
at some
break,
point.
Yeah.
Could that breaking point be tomorrow?
I feel like there
Scary question.
it is a scary question. But I also have been really questioning I think too we've been in a space where we've been using technology and social media just way more as a whole. And the media lately definitely increases that stress and that anxiety. We're finding out that certain news stations are like more towards one party. And we're also seeing like even just this morning, they did like a whole story about all the buildings in downtown Denver and how they're boarding up their stores because they just
They're
aren't
just getting ready.
preparing for tomorrow because it's like the sad part about it was they had a guy on there who's a small business owner, has a restaurant down there, and he said this is like the new norm basically. Like I'm preparing for what we've already been kind of dealing with, even though we've been trying to like keep our business above water. So then you see all of those images and then it just makes like tomorrow feel even more heavier. Not to say that media hasn't always played a part, because it always has. I just think that there's been way more of a stronger like stance on a particular person or a particular issue, and they do not care about being bipartisan at all. And they will follow the story to the end. So that just increases it. So I think everybody is just kind of like, I'm to the point where I'm just like, let's just rip the Band-Aid off and see what happens. Because the tension of like getting here is, I think, is killing me worse than it just like happening. Because this just like you can cut it with a knife.
For real.
Yeah.
I do want to just maybe something for us to talk about another time too, is how inescapable that media feels. And also the balance between how much people are using, I think particularly social media as an outlet and as an escape, and that can often be very positive.
As a coping
as a coping mechanism. And how it can also be very harmful. So I think that's just another way that people can often feel stuck. Like, I need to get on Instagram to like see something good and happy, or to connect with my friend from high school or whatever. And also I can't get on there without seeing 10 things that are like, this is what's going to happen to this group of people that you belong to if this person's elected or whatever. Like we're now having to balance. I mean, again, it's always been the case, but we are now probably more so having to balance those pros and cons.
Yeah. And voter intimidation and just like, that all plays a factor. Just what we see on media. So I agree with you.
Thank you for all of your input. Before we go, is there any last statements?
Are we looking for positive states?
Yeah, maybe like how do we how are we gonna handle tomorrow? Like, what are we gonna do tomorrow to stay calm or?
Just, I think, whatever your last statement you wanted to do.
Okay.
It's completely up to you.
Okay.
We'll start.
Get them.
Let's start with
Get 'em.
Manuel, and then we'll go around and we'll come out.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
I think just we know social media heuristics, those shortcuts that we see every day as far as gathering information. If you need to take time from it, do so. I'm personally not going to look at anything dealing with the election. I did what I had to do, spoken to people that I've spoken to, and they did what they had to do. And if it means taking a day away from social media, then do so. A couple days ago, I actually sat down and read a newspaper. I was like, "This is," and I mean, yes, it's still the news, it's still information, but it's not just trying this hyper connectivity, right? It's not just pulling information at will and being like, "Oh, I don't understand this. Okay, let me look this up." No, it's read this newspaper. Okay, I'll look into that later, or I'm going to speak to somebody about it and take it from there. But really, just not even going to think about it. Just the ballot's been dropped off. Going to go to work, focus on schoolwork, and then just take it from there. And then, that's all I can do, at least.
Definitely.
Final thought from me. Number one is please vote. If you have not voted, please vote. This is the night of the 2nd, so you have tomorrow to drop your ballot off or go in person. And I think maybe a bigger thing for me beyond that is just to always exercise critical thinking. I think it's a way that I always try really hard to live my life is to think what I actually care about, what my actual end goal is, and what the safest, smartest, best path is to that end goal, and not based on what the world or the country or media is telling me, but what makes sense to me in my heart, what feels like it's going to treat the most people the best, be the best for me, things like that. I think it's very easy to get swept up in what people think or what people are telling you. So I think I'm always asking or imploring people to just try to take a little bit of a step back and think for themselves, and figure out what is really meaningful to you.
Definitely.
Well, I'm about to keep it real. Okay.
Do it.
There is something in me during election night. It's like the Super Bowl. So I cannot sit here and say that I'm not gonna watch it. I think that is probably a good idea. That I would be more like Manuel and not watch it, but I would be totally lying to myself. I'm gonna be watching it like all day. And it's like exciting to me. It's not like it does fill me with a little bit of anxiety, but it's like I get pumped up type of anxiety. Like every time I look, it's different. I'm like, oh yeah. So I get excited about it.
So what you're saying is that we should have new commercials on election night, and there should be some sort of puppy election halfway through to keep everyone else entertained.
If they had commercials, like that would just make it just so grand. But that's just like my caveat. And you'll probably see me on Monday, and I'll be stressed out, and like half of my hair will be falling out. But that's what it is. But I think I'm going to try to really encourage people to stand by your choice in the way that you vote, but also I would love to see people just have a conversation about it.
Respectfully.
Yeah, like instead of approaching it as like you feel this way, so we can't continue our relationship together because the way that you feel about this makes me feel a certain way. I would encourage people to be curious.
Yeah, definitely. Ooh,
Be curious. Incredible advice
yeah.
Yeah,
for all of life.
Yeah.
You know,
Well
be
said.
cautious because sometimes we never know what that curiosity will get you.
Yeah.
But to just be curious, like, you know what? I hear that you voted for that. Tell me more about that.
Done exactly
You know.
right.
So that's what I would encourage, and I will be.
Well said.
Yeah, definitely. My final thought would be, no matter what happens tomorrow, life is still going to go on, and we still have to love ourselves, and we still have to find a way to love each other, and we still have to find a way to get through what is still happening. We still got to deal with COVID. There's a lot of unfinished work, and tomorrow is not the end all be all to life. Tomorrow is not the countdown to an asteroid hitting the earth, right? Tomorrow is just a day that decides who the president will be. But ultimately, you have to think about the power that is within the people. They don't vote themselves in. We vote them in.
Mhm.
And when we vote them in, then that means that ultimately we have the power. And I think we forget about that. I think we forget about how much power that we actually do have. I think we forget about how we get to decide the way that things go. And I think that no matter what, we should remember that. Right.
Mm. Good point.
Well, thank you for joining us. We'll be doing this every Monday. We'll be talking about topics. We'll also be looking at it from a counselor perspective. As you can see, everybody at the table is a counselor or a counselor in training. So we want to thank you for spending this time with us. Please leave comments. Please follow us. And also keep in mind that you can also join in these conversations as well. All right. Have a good one.
Thanks, folks.